Canada's premiers have wrapped up 3 days of meetings that was mainly focused on the ongoing trade dispute with the United States. The deadline for those talks is now just a little over a week away. But Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew said today the date of a deal isn't what is most important.
It's really important for Canada to get a good deal rather than rushing to take any deal, including one that might harm us in the long term. I think our kids and grandkids are going to look back at this time as an inflection point where we had the opportunity to stand up for our nation's independence.
Scott Moe is the Premier of Saskatchewan. Premier, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Well, what's your level of comfort that we'll have some clarity or resolution with the United States by August? It seems like we've accepted it's not going to happen, and it's just going to be a persistent state of affairs.
Yeah, we need to really keep the long game and what our goal is when it comes to our discussions with the United States, because things are changing at times on a daily or hourly basis, and it's important for us to understand that we do have a trade deal that is in place today, and we're negotiating, what a renewal of that or a revamp of that might look like in what is, very quick changing, quick moving and challenging environment.
We've seen just since the premiers have been here in Huntsville that Japan has ended up, look, we don't know the fine print of any of this, right? So the devil is in the details, but it looks like a 15% tariff for Japan. There's reports in the Financial Times that the European Union is going to agree to a 15% tariff. Are you worried the baseline with America is just going to be 15%, which is a heck of a lot higher where we've been?
Well, I think my hope would be zero, but we have to be less than everyone else, just in the interest of economic security, not just for the U.S. and Canada, but for our continent. And if we truly are concerned as North Americans of our, the economic, the fuel, the food security, the manufacturing security, the economic security that we have, ultimately, and utilizing that to invest in our general security, we're going to have to be less than that. So preferably zero, and I think zero should still be the target. That's what we have now with the USMCA agreement. But we'll leave those negotiations to the federal government in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, but less than 15% could still be pretty bad, right? I mean, it feels like the situation we're in. I mean, is there a number that is simply an unacceptable level? Like, is it 10? Is it 8? Like, because certain industries like auto probably can't survive numbers like that.
No, and that's why we need to be negotiating from a space where we push it down as low as possible, simply because of the integration that we have across the border. And listen, I've long been a voice saying that when President Trump puts a tariff on Canadian products that are heading to the U.S., that has a financial impact negatively on American families and American industries. It pushes costs up for Americans. And so, the closer we are to zero, the better for America, the better for Canada, and I would say the better for North America.
Daniel Smith said at the closing press conference today that if there's a deal on the sectoral tariffs by August 1, she'd consider that a win, and then you move on and negotiate on CUSMA, probably starting in 2026. Do you think we should hope for anything on sectoral tariffs by August 1? It seems like that win may not be there.
I think I'd be less bullish on the date and more concerned about the content of the agreement. As I said, we have an operational agreement now. However, there are some challenges in certain sectors around that, impacting Saskatchewan as well, I might add. But we do need a strong agreement moving forward if we are to achieve what our goals are out into the future.
Right. It seems, though, quite possible there could be nothing on August 1. That is just whatever the president puts on social media, and then Canada has to scramble to adapt to it. I mean, how do you think the country needs to approach it in a circumstance like that?
Well, I think they're approaching it in the right way. I think Dominic LeBlanc was here, met with us yesterday, and then was off to Washington, D.C. And he certainly, I think, is the voice for our government to have in D.C. alongside the Prime Minister. And so whether it be the U.S. or other markets around the world that are of importance to Saskatchewan and Canada, like China, the Prime Minister is engaging and really prioritizing the credibility that Canada has on the global stage with global leaders, including President Trump. And so, credit to him for that. We need to keep it up.
President Trump has really injected an urgency and a focus, I would argue, into the political agenda and the economic focus of the Canadian leadership class. But he also seems to have just sucked all of the partisanship out of it. You and I have been at a lot of these conferences together. This is very different, Premier. Like, there is no factions, there is no disagreement, there's none of the proxy war stuff we saw in the past? I mean, is that just a feature of the moment, or do you think this is something that can persist?
Both. I think when you look at the Council of Federation, and this is probably my 7th or 8th meeting, the Council of Federation has often been able to work through partisan differences that we might have. I think of, former Premier Horgan or Andrew Furey around the table, not of the political stripe I might be, but we found points of consensus. And so the Council of Federation table certainly has been able to achieve that. What we see and what I see, I speak for myself with Prime Minister Carney, is an individual that is, very much engaging with the provinces on where we might land as Canadians, and is bringing, I think, a wealth of common sense to the conversation. And he has some priorities, and you're starting to see those play out. Trade is a priority, increasing the effort that he is making and his government is making for Canadian credibility in the global atmosphere, the global environment, and I credit him for that. That's something we've always been focused on at the provincial level, and I think that's all we've been asking for is that very mature conversation and collaboration with the premiers on how can we do best by Canadians that we collectively represent them all.
But just as a final point, Premier, if you look ahead with this uncertainty, there's going to be some rough times, quite probably economically. Like, a lot of jobs have already been lost. A lot more are pretty close to slipping under. And there is going to be a political impulse at different levels, federally, wherever, to blame them and to start trying to capitalize on these struggles rather than solve them. If and when that kind of a dynamic unfolds, do you think this can last? I mean, what role do premiers then play in trying to hold it all together?
That will definitely happen as we have global trade challenges, tariff discussions, counter-tariff discussions. If we don't change how we do business in Canada, here's the trump card, if I could use that Canadians have, is if we drastically change the regulatory environment so that we can attract investment, create jobs, have the construction and expansion of our industries.
Right.
That's the opportunity, and so the challenges are easily identified by yourself and many others. There is an opportunity in here, unlike I have seen in over a decade, for Canada and Canadians to really capitalize on. But it is going to require some of the change internally in what we do as a nation, what we do as provinces. And, I'm cautiously optimistic that I see Prime Minister Carney and his government, looking very seriously at making those changes, changing the regulatory environment to have the investment dollars come into Canada. That is my hope, is that we as Canadians have the opportunity over the next number of months and years to truly capitalize on some of the uncertainty that we're seeing globally, is for Canada to come in and be a beacon of certainty in that environment.
So the test isn't necessarily what happens with Trump, as important as that is. It's whether you deliver on what you're promising internally, the things you can't control.
Both are important.
Yeah.
Both are important. You hear premiers coming out of Western Premiers meeting and the First Minister's meeting in Saskatoon talking about a port-to-port corridor, opening up Asian and European markets. That's aside and in addition to whatever we can achieve with the United States of America. And so there is opportunities in all of this, but we have to change the way we do things and make it more real and more possible.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, always appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.